Hey, welcome back to Deck Check, where you better check yourself before you deck yourself. We are so excited to have you back for the 16th episode of the Off Meta podcast. I'm Ganesh.
And I'm Samurai Dancer. Today we're in the eye of the zombie storm with Geralf, the Fleshwright. Welcome to Off Meta, where the brews that are hot shoot their shot.
In this show, we focus on the fascinating off-meta cEDH decks most people haven't seen yet, like the absolutely terrifying Geralf the Fleshwright. It's a tongue twister, man. We're getting too many of these days. We'll have a fresh new episode every Friday by 6 p.m. Central.
Off Meta is not responsible for the tournament results of decks and cards mentioned on Off Meta. If there's a brew you'd like us to take a look at, or you'd like to appear on the show itself, just let us know in the Discord or in the comments down below.
Yeah, and if you like this sort of content, remember to like and subscribe. Maybe send this to your friends. And this week, instead of the news, because we haven't really had a lot of tournaments, and we'd like you to know about this fun, free Pride Online cEDH tournament on August 10th called Rainbow Rumble.
You can use any combination of two cards that can legally be your commander and partner them together. This includes legendary creatures, backgrounds, and planeswalkers that can be your commander. In addition, you can even partner two backgrounds together. Not recommended. That will not work.
Yeah, so for example, you could have a Rograk and Dihada pairing, or maybe a Street Urchin background and Tethersthought Doom of Fools.
With about $80 in prize support for the top four players, our Pride-themed prizing is as followed. One Sliver Overlord Secret Lair foil, prize at about $60. For second place, Diabolic Intent Borderless foil, prize at about $10 in value. For third, Forbidden Orchard Borderless, $7 in value. And for fourth, the special Rainbow Command Tower Borderless, about $3 in value. Now, remember, this is a free tournament.
Yes, it is very free. The only requirement is that you are not banned from another tournament for, well, cheating-related reasons. If you're just mean, maybe we can work with you. And also, you'll get a special Discord role if you make top 4 or top 10, depending on the number of players we get. And without further ado, let's hop right into Geralf the Fleshwright. Are you ready to take your cEDH gameplay to the next level? Join my coaching program and learn from a proven champion. With many tournament wins, I offer personalized coaching tailored to your deck and goals. Enjoy ongoing support, gameplay reviews, practice games, and individual or group lessons. Don't just compete, conquer. You can contact me anytime through the Discord link below. Alright, we're here with Holden Pryo, also known as Ben. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your favorite decks, how long you've been playing, and where in the country you are generally speaking.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm in the southern western part of the states. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, so about 45 minutes from the Mexico border. Nice and hot down here. And I've been playing Magic since about 1999, but I've been playing any form of EDH, and in this case, only cEDH. I've never really played any casual EDH at all. I've been playing since January of last year of 2023. And probably outside of cEDH, my favorite decks are kind of super unique brews. I really like to brew. I'm not more of like a competitive like tuner or someone who will take somebody else's list and try to make it better. I really like to build something from the ground up. Sometimes that's not to my benefit because, there's a meta for a reason because those decks are good. But in 60 card formats, I played a lot of Pauper, a lot of Legacy, a little bit of Vintage, and a lot of Modern. And then when Pioneer came out, I played that until they ruined it with bans. And I really like playing like prowess decks, spell slinging, storm style kind of combo shells, or super unexpected backdoor combo tribal decks. So like I played an allies deck in Modern when Lurrus was still legal that beat face and won the game that way, or oops, all of a sudden we just self-mill ourselves for our entire library and then reanimate a Thassa's Oracle for a win. So those are the kinds of lists I like to play generally. And in cEDH, I've been kind of sticking to that of trying to find space to brew as much as I could.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
really tracks with the deck we're looking at today.
Yeah, right.
How have you done overall in tournament? Like, have you taken this to any tournaments? How's that experience been for you?
Yeah. I haven't played, huge online or in-person tournaments. I've played some comp REL tournaments locally in our local scene. And also just coincidentally, our local scene, I'm sure there's some areas that have way more top tier level players, but our local scene, considering we're a small town, has some pretty good players in it that have put up some good results in online tournaments and stuff. So we have some good competition locally, which is really nice because then I get to kind of sharpen my skills, and it's not just, I brewed this weird deck that beats all my local scrubs. There's real strong players from Tucson, so they really know how to represent us strong, which is cool. But my first outing with the deck, just almost like an F&M kind of weekly, I went 2 wins, 1 draw, and then we did 3 rounds. And then beyond that, my first local monthly, we do like a comp REL, and a bunch of people from Phoenix, Arizona come down, and it's probably anywhere between 20 and 40 players depending on the turnout. I top forward that, lost on turn 2 to a very, very unfortunate series of events. And then the following monthly kind of comp REL tournament that we had, I took first place. We split it 3 ways between the 3 of us. That kind of forced us into a situation where I could force a draw between the 3 of us after knocking out one of the players. So yeah, those have been kind of the tournament reports, so to speak. And I'm very excited, but also nervous because coming up 1 week from the time of this recording, well, actually not even, in 3-4 days, I'm going to be out in Fishbowl 4 in San Diego. So that'll be a time to really kind of test the metal of the deck and really see if it has legs or if it's just something I've been having fun with.
Okay. So before we get too far into it, why don't you tell us who your commander is? Just let us know, for those listening at home, what they do, their mana cost, all that sort of good stuff. Who is this?
Sure. Yeah, it's a mono blue 3-drop commander. So this is Geralf the Fleshwright. He's a 2 generic and 1 blue. It's a legendary creature, human warlock, and he's a 2/3. And it is very similar to almost like a Monastery Mentor effect. So whenever you cast a spell during your turn, which is super important, other than your first spell that turn, you create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token. Then has a second clause, which is whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So this tracks, not specific to the commander, it just tracks the turn itself. So if you played a bunch of zombies that turn without Geralf in play, then played Geralf, then cast some spells and made some more zombies, it would see all those previous zombies as well.
Ah, okay. So the way I see this is you just have to play 1 random spell at the beginning of your turn, and then every other spell that you play after that is going to get you a 2/2 zombie and then what about its second clause?
That then grows it permanently.
Yeah,
so the first zombie that entered.
Yeah.
Correct,
So
yeah.
okay. So you're trying to play a lot of spells in one turn. Like, you don't necessarily care what those spells are, but you care that you are casting them and getting those cast triggers.
Yeah, exactly. Spinning the wheels is mono blue zombie storm. Yeah, and your spinning of the wheels is pretty good here. That's why cheap or free cantrips are good in a deck like this. And what drew me to it initially, and the reason why I'm even exploring it. Oh, by the way, this Commanders from Outlaws of Thunderjunk proper, not the Commanders, but the regular set. The reason why I was so drawn to it initially is because in the time where I've played Vintage and sometime in a little bit in Modern Legacy, watching the fact that Monastery Mentor, Vintage is a format where you can play literally any card at all, but full stop. Outside of ANT and things like that, there's no banned cards. They're just possibly restricted. Monastery Mentor is one of those restricted cards. And this is more or less mono blue Monastery Mentor in the command zone. And when I saw that and that kind of clicked the first time, it's like, oh, we can do some broken stuff. So
it's even better than Monastery Mentor because the zombies get counters, they don't get prowess.
Yeah.
So in a format of Commander where mono blue has had many iterations from Urza to the earliest one of Azuz, not a zombie. There we go. I was like, it's not a Zuza. That's the green one. It's a zombie. Why are we going with the Zomboy?
Well, yeah, it's definitely something I've thought a lot about because I actually have played a lot of mono blue commanders as I've been brewing along the way. I built the reality chip and I built a really, really detailed primer for it and spent a lot of time working on it right prior to this card getting spoiled. So leading right up to this, I had just spent a whole bunch of time in mono blue. And I guess kind of the way I look at it is, I have a deep hatred for green cards. That one's just irrational. It's not logical. It's just kind of one of those little kid things where when you first start playing the game, at least for me, back in '99, I was like, I hate green cards, and since then, I've still kind of felt that way. So I like to play Sans green whenever I can. I like Grixis, I like Esper, and just blue is really powerful. Obviously, I mean, it's a lot of people could make the argument that if you're going to play a monocolor commander, though, blue isn't necessarily the best route to go. Maybe that's red or black if you're looking at like tournament results and things like that, or maybe even green if you look at like Isan. But in this space, the reason why I'm looking here as opposed to looking at like an Urza or even Teferi to do like Chainveil shenanigans or Wizard Tribal like you talked about is because this creates this thing that I really like to do in Magic, which is confuse my opponents about my plan A versus my plan B. So when first looking at this deck and when sitting down, and even when you start getting into a couple turns into the game, it's not always very clear what it is that I'm doing. And if you didn't have my deck list in front of you, maybe you would think, oh, well, do you eventually self-mill into a Thoracle? Do you play intuition lines? Are you on Thought Latch plus Thoracle combo? Are you brain freezing out your opponents? Are you throwing all these zombies at people? Say again?
I would imagine people assume that you're on Cauldron 90% of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And so there's all these kind of thoughts that I love to, I guess, kind of prey on preconceived notions about staples of the format. And they're normally right. So I'm not saying that people are like dumb for thinking that. It's more just I want to use that to my advantage when I can. And I love the idea of sometimes I go turn one Jeweled Lotus, Geralf, spin my wheels on one or two spells and kind of make a little bit of a wide board and then spend the rest of the game really pressuring life total of the opponent that's on Adnaz or whatever and going super wide and tall. But then the literal very next game, or even within that game, if the game plan switches, I can, basically turn into this combo kill or take an extra turn or storm off with Shrieking Drake effects. And we can kind of get into some of that.
Okay. So what is your general strategy for Geralf the Fleshwright? Like, what are we don't have to get too specific, but what does our overall game and like board state look like in an average game?
I would say an ideal hand. I can mulligan pretty hard with this deck just because there's a lot of cantrips in it, which aren't common in a lot of cEDH. So you can find your ways to dig back out. I mean, I'm on Gush, I'm on Treasure Cruise, I'm on Brainstorm, I'm on the Cantrip Cartel, Brainstorm, Preordain, Ponder. And if you're going to play them, you got to play those super goofy art versions that I have just to confuse the hell out of your opponents. But those cards dig you back out of early situations, almost kind of the way that like a Rogsai can dig itself back out of an early mulligan using a wheel. It's not quite the same, obviously, but it's a similar thought. And my game plan is normally to try to go either like I identify the game plan based off of the opening hand. So I want an opening hand that can kind of try to turbo out my commander and then have one of two kind of routes to go. Either a bunch of wheel spinning, make a bunch of dudes and use that as a way to pressure the board early, or have the other version of the hand, which is the kind of more lean into the combo aspect side of things, where that's like a Shrieking Drake style effect, of which there are three. Basically a card you can just keep casting and bouncing to its hand over to your hand over and over again while gaining some sort of value from it. So with a card like Danny Pink or Jason Bright, cEDH All-Stars. So these cards that we can dive into the text on, but these that essentially just kind of pay you off for having ETB effects and things like that, or some sort of altar effect, like a Phyrexian Altar, which is an artifact that you can sacrifice a creature to make mana, or an Altar of Dementia that you can sacrifice a creature to mill a player equal to the power of that creature, or an Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice a creature to make mana that's colorless. So those are kind of, I'm looking for one of those two game plans plus an early turbo of mana. And then there's always, of course, the turn one Ristic or turn one Fish. I mean, those are great game plans, but that's kind of generic and boring.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so just looking to either present some sort of aggro token-based beatdown or commander plus lean into the combo aspect on the following turn. So like set up an engine and then go from there. One of the best parts about this, though, is the spells that I'm individually resolving don't matter too much because they're all cast triggers to make the zombies. Right. So cool. Yeah, I cast my Haymaker Phyrexian Altar that's going to give me all this value, and then someone spends their resources countering it. That's cool. I still just made a 5/5 or a 4/4 or whatever, depending on how many spells I've cast already for the turn. Some of the best spells in the deck are cards like Hidden Strings, which is a 2-mana sorcery that just untaps or taps up to 2 target permanents and then has Cipher. You can cipher onto a creature, basically imprinting it onto that creature. Whenever the creature connects with a player, you get to cast it again. So that's another cast, which means it's another zombie, and it also just makes more mana. So essentially, this is a free spell because it untaps 2 lands. Sometimes it makes you mana if you have an Ancient Tomb or City of Traders or whatever else. And then it makes you more mana again in your combat step when you cast again. So cards like that are so innocuous and in other decks are good, but aren't necessarily like game winning. Here in this deck, create this sort of overwhelming board advantage, almost the way that kind of like a Jetmir deck can, like the Naya, I think it's Naya or Jund Jetmir that just like makes a huge board and down touches and or double strikes or whatever and just kind of slam face. But I'm not leaning into the stack side of things. I'm leaning into the backdoor combo side of things.
So, yeah, I started out cEDH with Orvar in budget, so I'm very familiar with all Hidden Strings. It's a very good card. Yeah, you like basically if you have an attacker, you untap 4 things for 2 mana, which is really good, and it works. I see how it works really well with your deck here.
Definitely.
So we went over like you want to get to the hidden combos. Speaking about the hidden combo, what is your combos? How do you win with them?
So I always have a hard time when someone says, "Oh, well, I win the game with," and then they name a couple of cards that don't actually win the game. They just present overwhelming advantage, which I can understand. But if we're talking about,
I win the game with breach lines. Okay. What's the end of the breach line?
Yeah, right. Because if it involves targeting, then I'm sorry, but I resolve the One Ring this same turn cycle or whatever. You know what I mean? Like sometimes this stuff really does matter, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I win the game by taking infinite turns. Oh, good news for you. We're in a time tournament. Right. Yeah. So I enabled tags actually on my Moxfield list. So you can, if you click those, you can see, but they're pretty well organized. So the first kind of tag that we have is actual win cons. And this essentially there's 2 quote actual win cons, which are the first 2, and then the next 3 cards are combat damage based actual win cons. So the first 2 are Altar of Dementia, which is a 2-mana artifact. It's 2 generic. I think it came out in Antiquities originally, and it says sacrifice creature, target player mills cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power. So there's a lot of ways to make infinite power and infinite zombies in this deck, but there's also some ways where you don't need to make infinite. You just need to make 400. And I know that sounds kind of wild, or 300 or whatever. I know that sounds kind of like, how could you possibly make 300 power and not go infinite? But the way that clones work with Geralf is really goofy. So, for example, Roaming Throne is a card. We can get into all of that stuff, but if you can start to imagine these double and triple triggers on Geralf, and now every spell cast starts equaling somewhere in the range of 20 power, 30 power, 50 power, and it just starts kind of growing like this. And then you throw them at your opponent's faces, so to speak, by stacking them to the Altar of Dementia, milling your opponents out and passing the turn. This is a dangerous plan for obvious reasons. A lot of decks use their graveyard. A lot of decks have ways to win at instant speed these days using Born Upon a Wind and all these other weird end steps, like that ghost one. I can't remember its name right now, the blue one. Yeah, there's an otter. Yeah, there's a new otter.
Yeah.
That card's...
Hello, mother. Hello, father. Lost to a flashing otter.
I like that. I can't promise I won't steal it.
Yeah, I know. That's definitely stealing that when I win with an otter or I lose with it. Definitely going to use it. But I feel like since the only thing that milling has really ever had a problem with has been the Shuffle Hulk, Shuffle Titans. Those don't exist anymore. They're gone. Memory's Journey, that's a pretty easy one to stump. I feel like you're perfectly fine. You're running Fairy Mastermind, which means that you can mill people out and then kill them. That is the easiest way to win with that.
Yeah.
The best part about Fairy Mastermind is it doesn't target, so you can get around the One Ring.
Exactly. Then you've got Temporal Matt Fisher. I already know what you're going to do with that. You're going to bounce all their stuff and wheel them.
Yeah, this is my way to kind of have like a cheap or cheaper, more higher floor but lower ceiling Hullbreaker horror kind of in this deck. Or not Hullbreaker, the other one.
Yes.
Yeah. I ran Magnus. I ran Ral. I've run quite a few things. I know how good Temporal Fisher actually is. So the minute I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, so that's what we're doing in this deck. Then you got Temporal Trespass and Savor the Moment. I can't help but notice that your commander makes increasingly exponentially bigger zombies. Is it because you want to take that turn and just kill people with attack combat?
All right, I think you caught me. I surrendered. Yes, it's very much so just the, if making a bunch of dudes was good, well, making a bunch of dudes with haste is better. And we're playing mono blue, so there are literally no haste enablers outside of Crashing Drawbridge, which is a garbage defender. And I think there's another artifact that might do it if I can.
Almost Memorial.
Gotcha. Yeah, and those are both either terrible cards or really expensive. And
that have run mono blue for these are terrible cards.
Yeah. So pseudo haste is let's just take an extra turn, and I'm playing the cheapest possible take an extra turn spells. Both of these spells cost either at their cheapest 2 or 3 mana, because with Sapphire Medallion in the deck, Savor the Moment can cost 2 blue. So just blue. It's normal CMC. For anybody who doesn't know Savor the Moment, it is from, I believe, Lorwyn originally, or maybe Shadowmoor. And it's 1 generic, blue. It's a sorcery, and it just says, take an extra turn after this one, skip the untapped step of that turn. So you don't need to untap all your mana and everything else, because all the summoning sick guys that you just made that have, they're equal to 100 power or whatever, they never tapped anyways. So you go to your turn, swing, you win. And then Temporal Trespass is 11 mana. 8 of it is generic, 3 of it is blue pips. It's a sorcery, and it says take an extra turn after this one, exile Temporal Trespass, but it has Delve. And we really fill the yard a lot because, like I said, we're playing the Cantrip Cartel, and we're kind of spinning our wheels a lot on cards like that. And I am not cannibalizing my own graveyard, and Altar of Dementia can be another way to kind of feed that if I need to. It doesn't come up a lot, but sometimes it does. And also, I just want to say really quick, in case anybody doesn't know what Temporal Fissure does, what we were talking about earlier, it's a 5 CMC sorcery from Scourge, I think, originally. And it's 4 generic, 1 blue, return target permanent to its owner's hand. Notice it doesn't say non-land permanents. You can bounce lands, but it has Storm. So if you storm off in a turn and then cast it, and you bounce like 6 or 7 permanents, sometimes you just bounce all the rocks off the table and the important lands. And it's just so much advantage, and you've made enough zombies, 20, 30 power of zombies, that you set the whole table back into the Stone Age, and you haven't lost anything, and it's almost uncounterable. A Flusterstorm and a Mindbreak trap can get it, but outside of that, nothing really else can.
So I guess your win cons are kind of like Geralf be going through his frozen phase. Untapping never bothered him anyways.
Yeah.
I love Temporal Fissure. I love blue decks that just go like, I don't have to win. I just have to make it miserable for you to try to win.
Yeah.
This was the old Urza win con where it was like, well, I don't have to win. I just have to make it so you don't want to win by bouncing
the Winter Orb and things. Yeah.
Like that's what they would do. They would use Tidesprout Tower and bounce all the lands and be like, okay, I have infinite constructs. You have no lands. You have no permanents. I have my deck. Pass turn. I dare you to try to win. And guess what? Most people couldn't.
You can't. Yeah, usually.
You really can't. It is oppressive. There's a reason why that was. So what's Urza's win con? I don't have to be the first one to win. I just have to be the last one to lose.
Nope. I will say this is kind of a newer change for me, is playing Temporal Fissure over a card I used to play, which is also a win con card that I took out of the deck, at least for now, and I'm testing it, which is called Arcane Heist. It's in my sideboard. It's a newer card. It's a new Cypher card. Anytime they print cards that say Storm, anytime they print cards that say Gravestorm, or anytime they print cards that say Cypher, an angel out there somewhere gets its wings, and I get excited. So when I saw that this card was dropping in the OTJ Commander, I think it was, set, I got super hyped, and it's pretty good. It's essentially my version of like Praetor's Grasp in this deck. When a Rog or a Blue Farm List or whatever is out of win cons, they still have Praetor's Grasp, or they still have meme Betrayal. This is kind of like that for me. So this is 2 generic and 2 blue. It's a sorcery, and it has Cipher, just like Hidden Strings does, where you can imprint it onto a creature when you cast it and then recast it when it connects. And it says you may cast target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into their graveyard, exile it instead. And this does 2 really huge things. One, this represents 4 spell casts on a single card, which is massive for this deck. So if this is the first spell that you cast for your turn, full stop, it still represents 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. It still represents 9 power of zombies just on this one spell. If you're able to connect with a creature that it's ciphered onto,
Right.
and if I'm out of win cons, I just steal other people's win cons. You know,
It's pretty cool. So I noticed that Geralf makes zombie rogues. You ever think of Notorious Throng?
yeah, it's actually in the considering pile, and I played that and knowledge exploitation for a little while. Knowledge exploitation is another prowl card that essentially just is like a bribery effect, but for instants or sorceries. That gets cheaper, if you've connected with a rogue. So yes, I have. I think they're sweet, but it was a little too cute. I've done a lot of iterations on this deck. I have 5 current copies of this list. 4 of them are unlisted, and 1 of them is public. This is the public one. The 4 unlisted ones are all totally different win cons. A similar shell, but all different. There's a Poison Storm version that uses Prologue to Phyresis, the new Whale, and that wizard that anytime you cast a non-creature spell, you proliferate. So it's like
Flux
all
Channeler?
proliferate shenanigans. Yeah, Flux Channeler. And that deck is pretty sweet. It does some cool things, does stuff with level up creatures and planeswalkers and such. But it was, again, a little too cute. And as much as I love to brew, I also like to win. And we're playing to win. This is
Right.
So, there's a version of the deck that's all in on Zombie Tribal that really dives into the tribal payoff. Again, it was a little too slow. It really grinds well, but other decks grind better. And I'm not beating I'm not beating the eventuality engine of a Sisay or a Magda when we're in this grind fest of a format. I need to have this ability to sit down at a pod and be able to turbo out a win early if I can. Or to be able to pivot into the beatdown game plan. So yeah, I like the rogue tribal synergy because no one sees it coming because, reading the card explains the card, but reading the card is hard. So for some reason, people don't read the card,
Okay. Yeah, so what are you doing with this deck in the early game?
For me, especially when I'm trying to lean on the turbo plan, the early game for me is really just turns 1 through 3. If I'm on a turbo plan, and when I say a turbo plan, what I really mean about this is I want to turbo out my commander on turn 1 and possibly cast 1 or 2 other spells. Then the following turn, pop off really hard with an engine I've established. So essentially, like if I went, I don't know, this is like a perfect hand, but Jeweled Lotus, Geralf, Ancient Tomb, Altar of Dementia pass, or Jeweled Lotus, Geralf, Ancient Tomb, Dramatic Reversal, ISO Scepter, because this deck is an infinite outlet with being able to have mana positive rocks, and you make infinite guys. Because you just have infinite spell casts. Right. So those are like those turbo early plans. But any sort of sacrifice outlet, so basically Jason Bright is a really, really powerful early plan. This is a card I definitely will read because I had never read it before starting to try to Scryfall out cards for this deck. This is a card from the Fallout set, and it is Jason Bright, Glowing Prophet, or as I like to call him, Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. But it's 2 generic and a blue. It's a legendary 2/3 zombie mutant advisor, and it says whenever a zombie, which is important, or a mutant you control dies, if its power was different from its base power, draw a card. So in this deck, this says whenever one of your tokens dies, except for the very first one, you draw a card, which is huge. And then it also says pay 2 generic, sacrifice a creature. Notably, you don't tap Jason Bright to do this, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control against flying until end of turn. So this is another way where if you have some extra mana laying around, you can kind of start doing this loop where you're like stacking this zombie to grow another zombie to then stack another zombie. And you draw 3 or 4 cards along the way, hopefully finding some more fast mana and continuing the engine. So the early plans are turbo out commander and then chain through some cantrips or some early mana production or engine production, like one of the altars or one of the creatures that have these kind of alter effects like Jason Bright. And then by the time you get to turns 2, 3, the goal is to then really squeeze the table, forcing them to use resources on cards that, frankly, you don't care if they resolve or not, because you're just making more zombies. And that's the turbo side of it. Now, if I have an opening hand that I have a way to get out my commander, and it doesn't really lean into turbo, but it's really grindy and it has really powerful value. For example, a bunch of clone effects and some interaction, like some counter spells and bounces for the board, and maybe one piece of inevitability, like a storm payoff. I was on. It doesn't really matter what I was on. Anytime you see these sorts of effects in your opening hand and this way to kind of grind and create a mid-range value and a beatdown plan, then the game changes slightly. So you just need to get your commander out early, and then on turn 2, you want to make the biggest board possible. So just spin your wheels like crazy. This, for example, could look like having an island on turn 1, an island on turn 2, so that by the time you get to turn 3 with your commander out, you can cast some spells, maybe cast cards like Energy Tap, which is 1 blue from Legends. That's a sorcery that says tap target untapped creature you control, add an amount of colorless mana equal to that creature's casting cost to your mana pool. So this is basically a ritual in blue, but it only makes generic mana, colorless mana.
Right.
So, you cast spells like this, you turbo out a bunch of zombies because you're just spinning your wheels and creating more mana and just kind of doing nothing, essentially. But your board gets so overwhelming that then the table has to deal with that threat, and it gives you this inevitability where now you get an extra turn or two to start really leaning into the game plan that's going to win, like a take an extra turn spell, or you find the combo side of things. The clone effects do this really well. So you could play a Roaming Throne, for example, which I think a lot of people would know, but it's a 4-mana creature. It's an artifact creature golem, and it's a 4/4, and it has Ward 2, and it says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. So in this deck, we choose human, as weird as that might seem. And then when its creature type is, Roaming Throne is that creature type in addition to its other types. And if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers an additional time, meaning both of the triggers on Geralf will double trigger, which means if you cast one other spell, what that looks like is it's make a 2/2 zombie, make another 2/2 zombie. Both triggers are on the stack. The first one resolves, and it's just a 2/2. The second one resolves, sees the first one, and says, oh, this is the second zombie for turn. Put 1/1/1/1 counter on it. But because that's a trigger, it gets doubled, so you get another trigger on it. So it's every spell cast. The first one goes, make a 2/2, make a 4/4. Then the next spell cast says, make a 6/6, make an 8/8. So you can already see how that instantly just became 22 power off 2 spells. Like, this is where the clone effect side of the deck, and I see your face right now saying, right, that's the face I want my opponents to be making when they're like, wait, how did you just get 100 power on board? Like, I got to the point where I have a bunch of zombie tokens. I have Christopher Rush zombie tokens. They're sick. But I started just using infinite tokens and cutting them into a grid and writing the number of power and toughness on them because there's so many zombies on board that I can't track them anymore. Can't use dice or anything anymore. It's just too much to physically handle on the table. So yeah, that's the early game plan is the engine side of things for the mid-range beatdown plan, or lean into the combo like altars and sacrifice outlets. Oh, he's pulling out the tokens.
I've got this is mostly zombie tokens. I got play to win zombie token. I've got some
nice.
I believe this is Hidden Fortress, but I've also got Rob Alexander zombie tokens.
Oh, sick.
In addition to just having just an actual factual stack of zombie tokens in my thing, in addition to infinity tokens. Fun fact, folks, you never just make the one zombie token. It's one of those tokens that the minute it gets made, you're making a lot of them in a row. I think most of my other tokens just have zombies on the back. That's why I went with them. Because first off, anything that makes zombie tokens is going to be fun. Looking at you, Army of the Damned. And once you make one, nothing just makes one zombie token and stops. The only thing that did that was a mass, and that was because I feel like Wizards was I feel like our players are tired of having a giant stack of tokens and half of them being zombies. So we're gonna make a little mechanic that makes it all just one token.
Yeah.
But yeah, doubling up when your commander has a triggered ability. So Roaming Throne is really good if your commander has a triggered ability that you want to double up that it makes sense on. I tried it in Malcolm Kedis. It was okay, but lo and behold, I'd rather just win the game with the double pirate. It's it doesn't win the game for me. For you, it literally puts out an extra 4 power onto the board. is what it does.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna go like it's gonna double trigger your pump. It's gonna double trigger your token creation. So
Yeah.
you're gonna go, oh look, I got a zombie. It's gonna get no counters on it. Okay, because no other zombie has come out before. New zombie. It's gonna come out with 2+1+1 counters. It's gonna be a 4/4 right off the bat.
Yeah.
So now you've got
So that first
8 power.
spellcast was 6 power. Just that alone.
Oh no, it was 8 power because you get
it ends up being 6 because
it's 2 counters and then +2, so 6. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's amazing for one spell.
So it basically just starts going like 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, and you can imagine like that's only 2-3 spellcasts. Like that happens very easily when your deck is filled with Brainstorm, Preordain, Ponder, Gitaxian Probe, Gush.
Right.
Like these spells are very easy and cheap to cast. Yeah, Gush is sick.
I love Gush. Gush is sick. Gush is like the sickest underplayed card. I'm still surprised you don't have an Aetherflux in it though.
Yeah, I have thought about it a lot. It's definitely, it always kind of, the downside I think to it is that this deck does not use the life gain very well. Like, I know that that's not really the reason why you play Aetherflux, but for me, like, and you can ask anybody that I play in my local meta, it's like, anytime they're asking me, oh, hey, do you think I should play this card in my blah, blah, blah deck? I'm always like, great, what's the ceiling, what's the floor? What is the magical Christmas land? Oh, great, you win the game? Cool. What's the floor? Oh, it's the literal worst dead card possible.
Yes.
Well, then maybe don't play that card unless you have all these obvious ways to tutor it, and it's that good, and it's that inevitable, and you can play it out of the graveyard, and you can blah, blah, But so for me, it was like I was looking at the floor of that card, and in this deck, I don't really need the life. I mean, sure, there's the One Ring, but I also just never get attacked. Like, who the hell's going to attack into a board full of 70 power? It's like you're not getting in over here.
Defiler of Dreams.
Yeah, that's a good call, but I have found that if you resolve that card and then cast any spell, you've more or less won the game. Like, there's really not coming back from that.
What's
the other
Defiler
card
of
I was
Dreams?
thinking about was Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Yeah. So real quick before we jump onto that, so Defiler of Dreams is a really good one to touch on just because it's such a weird one. So it's a 5-drop. This is a 5-mana 4/3. It's from the Dominaria United set. It's the Defiler kind of block. It's a Phyrexian Sphinx. So it's 3 generic, 2 blue for a flying Phyrexian Sphinx that says as additional cost to cast blue permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost a blue less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue you may pay, and whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card. So this is a card draw engine that also makes the first blue mana of every blue permanent that you cast into Phyrexian blue, if that's what you want it to be. And what's weird about this card that just happens to win you the game is a card like Shrieking Drake. So Shrieking Drake is just a singular blue for a flying 1/1 Drake that says when it enters the battlefield, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. So the idea being is that the downside is you have to bounce something else back. Well, they printed this card in Visions and didn't say another creature, so you can bounce itself. So then this just becomes pay 2 life, draw a card because of the Phyrexian Defiler trigger, and then it hits the board, bounces back to your hand. Oops, also I just made a zombie along the way that's huge. So even without Defiler, this card says, however much blue mana you have in your pool, make that many Geralf triggers this turn, and you're going to do it again next turn. This card is busted in this deck, and when I realized that there were 2 other versions of Freaking Drake that exist in MTG's history that are playable, I'll put that little asterisk there, because there's other versions. There's like Ancestral Statue and stuff like that, but there's 2 other versions that are playable. I got so excited. cEDH's Faithful is one. It does essentially the same thing. It's a singular blue for a 0/4 Naga Wizard. It has Exploit, which says whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. And it says when cEDH's Faithful exploits a creature, return target creature to its owner's hand, which means it can target itself, essentially doing the Shrieking Drake loop. And who's got a million creatures to sacrifice? This guy right here, because as I cast it, I made the zombie. So the zombie enters first, then the cEDH's Faithful enters, exploits the zombie, yum, 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 and then the cEDH's Faithful goes right back to my hand, and we get to do the whole thing over again, finishing the loop with a singular infinite power creature on board, if that's what you want. And then the last version that gets really weird and really spicy, especially because it's the ugliest art of all time, which is Dreamstalker. So this is actually from Time Spiral, and it's a blue and a generic, so it's 2 CMC for a 1/5, which is pretty cool stats, creature illusion. Yeah, that art is honestly the thing that nightmares are made of. And it says when it comes into play, you return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. So this one's awesome because you can do this kind of the same thing, especially if you have a sapphire medallion to reduce the cost. This is a similar thing. It's just a little more overcosted. But the best part about this one is this thing goes absolutely bonkers, truly bonkers when you play cards like Displacer Kitten. So if you have a Kitten on board, you play this card, it enters the battlefield and bounces your Mox Opal or whatever back to your hand. Then you cast the Mox Opal and it enters and it flickers the Dreamstalker, and the Dreamstalker bounces itself back to its hand or bounces another rock back to your hand. You get to create your own little mini Hullbreaker horror loop if you want to, making infinite mana, infinite dudes on board. Not that anybody needed help breaking Displacer Kitten. It's a broken card, but this is just a card that happens to break Kitten as well as a bunch of other cards. So this is a super fun one.
And then
we were talking about.
They're so cool. Yeah, I get the Soul Cauldron because you do run Fairy Mastermind, and your commander puts counters on the zombies.
So it's a good point. But I really kind of found at the end of the day that there were only, in the entirety of the whole deck, there were only 2 activated abilities in my creature suite. 3, I guess, if you count Sakashima the Imposter's, return to your hand at the end of turn ability. But so it's really just Fairy Mastermind and Jason Bright. And Jason Bright's ability, as a reminder, is the one where you can pay 2 generic, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature control. It gains flying until end of turn. These are not, that's not the best ability. So really, I would just be playing it as offensive graveyard hate and a way to kind of grow my creatures, which is nice, mind you, with cards like Danny Pink, which, again, another cEDH All-Star, one I had never read until brewing this deck. Danny Pink, the real name of this Magic card, as insane as that is from a Doctor Who set. It's a 4 CMC human soldier advisor. This is a legendary human soldier advisor. And important to note here, human, which means for my roaming throne lines, this gets doubled. So 3 generic and a blue for a 4/3 with Mentor. And it says creatures you control have, quote, whenever 1 or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card. So if this card is in play, it says every spell you cast this turn, draw a card. Because your zombie comes into play, hits the board, +1/+1 counter comes on it due to Geralf's ability, you draw a card. So this is just another super powerful value engine to draw you through your deck as you're cantripping through it and kind of going off with alter effects that make mana or the Phyrexian Defiler of Dreams to reduce costs on things, etc. So that's another synergy with Cauldron, because putting +1/+1 counters on things on opponent's turns is another way I could maybe get a little bit extra value to draw cards. But the floor seemed super low for what is only an okay ceiling. There's a different version of this deck, like I mentioned, which is all about counters, poison counters, planeswalker loyalty counters, things like that, where I do have Cauldron in it, and I have all the proliferate effects and stuff, but I couldn't justify it in this list because the slots, as weird as it might seem, are pretty tight.
No, I know exactly what you mean. This is a very linear strategy. People don't understand. The more straightforward the strategy is, the less slots.
Yeah.
There's less flex spots when you're like, this is what the deck's gonna do. Okay, so what about this spot? No. That takes away from this. I need as much interaction as possible, as much card advantage, because there are going to be these fringe spots in the deck that you must have because this is a linear strategy. You really do need that Savor the Moment. You do need that Temporal Trespass. You need these little small cards that eventually do take away from these flex spots. Loving the Gush. Still love that card. Every time I scroll down your list, I have to stop at the Gush. So that's pretty
common. Cool. Band and Popper, baby.
It took them too long.
Seriously, the card is broken. It was broken out of the gates, and it just was around for such a long time. That and Get Broke. Oh my gosh.
So we've basically covered the combos.
Yeah.
But up next, we'd like to ask, what is this deck doing in the mid game? I know we talked about Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was interrupting you.
Well, I was going to say, I know we talked about making a lot of zombies. So that's going to be a lot of times as our turns 1 through 3 is we're doing that, or we're going for a combo win. So what are we doing after we have a lot of zombies besides just swinging and killing people?
Yeah. So if we haven't won the game and we're getting to turns 4, 5, 6, then the big thing we're doing is probably recasting our commander a million times because we're getting super hated out of the game, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we got to that point, that's probably what's happening, right? And then, right? And it's okay. We're able to do that. It's a cheap commander. But the other side of it that I'm thinking about always is how do I do seemingly innocuous advantage spells, like advantage engine pieces, without kind of raising the alarm of a table that has a grip full of cards because they already had a Ristigar Fish or what, they've already built all this advantage, right? Or a Crom or whatever. Yeah, just kind of slide that one right in there. So a great example of this would be like Chain of Vapor. So, maybe my commander's been bounced to my hand. I've got like 15 power of zombies on board. I don't have a whole lot of other permanents except for maybe some mana rocks. So I look at the table and I go, float all my, I tap a blue and I go, Chain of Vapor, targeting my mana vault that's tapped. And the table's like, sure, yeah, that resolves. And then I stack that land and I target my Mox Oval and I float a blue. And sure, that resolves. And before you know it, I've got 7 or 8 mana in my pool, and I've bounced all my rocks back to my hand, and I've only really cast 1 spell for the turn. And then I look at the table and I say, Geralf, and they're like, well, you don't have any lands, and you aren't the threat. Like, you aren't the table threat at this point because, we know that the black player has a bunch of open mana and has a Adnaz coming. Or we know that the Rog Thras player has a Seedborn in play and the One Ring and is about to draw 25 cards a turn cycle or whatever. So I kind of lean into that feeling of, yeah, I'm a threat, but I'm the known threat. My threat is a bunch of dudes. Can you deal with a bunch of dudes? If you can,
We call this the give a mouse a cookie strat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, can I have 1? All right. How about 2? Well, what about just 3? And then it just kind of, before you know it,
makes a surprise here. Dude, this guy is gonna get like 20 cards in hand. Like, now, while I do have this 12/12 zombie, I gotta ask, anybody gonna respond? No? Okay, Saber.
And that's the big thing is that my deck is very much so not what you see is what you get. And yet, my commander is 100% what you see is what you get. You know exactly what my strategy is. I'm going to make a bunch of dudes. Can you deal with that? Most decks, they think they can. And so they have this known information in their head. And so they just keep thinking, oh, well, we're not losing this turn. And that's kind of the place where things kind of get lulled into a false sense of reality on a lot of these big turns, because what I end up doing then is, recast the commander, recast all my rocks, make a bunch more dudes, and then slam a Phyrexian Altar. And now all of the zombies from the last turn plus all these zombies equals 10 mana open. I sack my whole board, I make 10 blue mana, and then I start recasting Shrieking Drake 3 or 4 times, making a bunch more dudes, making a bunch more mana, making a bunch more Shrieking Drake, making a bunch more mana. And the table's like, geez, was I supposed to interact 15 spells ago? Like, is he going to do anything? Like, they're like, we know he only has like 2-3 cards in hand. Like, there's no way he could win here. And then I look at the table and go, Mind's Desire for 15. And, a card like that is essentially Adnaz in this deck, except for sometimes better. So for anybody who's not a person of culture, I suppose, Mind's Desire, up until recently, it wasn't even legal. It just got unbanned, which is awesome.
Player knew about Mind's Desire. That's why it was consistently banned.
Yeah, sure. That's fair. But yeah, Mind's Desire is originally from Scourge, with some of the coolest art available in all of Magic history, in my opinion. It's super funky and weird and out there. So it's 6 total mana. It's a sorcery, 4 generic, 2 blue, with Storm. And it says, shuffle your library, then remove the top card of your library from the game. Until end of turn, you may play it as though it were in your hand without paying its mana cost. There you go. You've got is that the Judge promo? Oh, that's sick. Pretty. That's really pretty. So yeah, Mind's Desire is one of those cards that has this ability to just completely swing a game, because I don't know what I'm getting off the Mind's Desire, but I know it's making me somewhere of the north of 50 or 70 power, because all those cards then get cast. Even if they get countered, they're all just getting cast. It's just making me more and more zombies. So these are kind of what that game plan looks like as I start to transition out of the early game into the mid-range.
They don't even get cast immediately. You can cast them throughout the turn. Like, they're just there. Yeah. So counter spells aren't even dead. Counter spells are just there. you're just like, yeah. Like I actually drew a pretty good bomb here. You want to deal with it? I've got like a pact of force and a force here. Like, go ahead, give me these zombies. Let's see.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to
because you're when you counter something, you are actively growing damage on the board.
Yeah, it's not small because by the time we got to this point, every spell I'm casting is like an 8/8 or a 10/10 or whatever. You know, like these are lethal threats now. So you Mind's Desire, you flip all the cards, right? And let's say you don't even hit anything good. You just hit a bunch of mana rocks and counter spells. Well, guess what? That equals 70 power, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go mana rock, holding priority, counter it, holding priority, counter my counter, holding priority, counter my counter, my counter, holding priority, counter my counter. And I'm just gonna, because all I'm going to do is cast all my spells just to cast them, just to fill my yard and make a bunch of zombies. And yeah, whatever. I lost all my lands and stuff, but I have a Phyrexian Altar and 100 power in play. And sometimes that doesn't win. Sure, sometimes you go to the next player's turn and they ad nauseam win the game or whatever. That's fine. But the flip side of this is sometimes you, and a lot of times, you Mind's Desire into like Temporal Fissure. And then you just cast Temporal Fissure and bounce everyone's board, including all of their lands. Or sometimes you Mind's Desire into a Windfall and reload. Or sometimes you Mind's Desire into take an extra turn. Or sometimes you Mind's Desire into draw 3 cards or draw 2 cards or Frantic Start, which is, 3 mana, draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and untap up to 3 lands. I mean, so you kind of can get to this point where, like, if you land one of your Storm spells, your Temporal Fissure or your Mind's Desire, you're usually winning that game. Not always, but it's almost guaranteed. And again, this kind of plays back into what I enjoy about Magic, which is I'm not a huge fan of like Thoracle Consultation win. It's not bad, and I understand why we play it, and it makes total sense, right? Card says win the game, costs 2 mana, it's a creature, it's hard to counter, it's an ETB effect. Like all these things are very obvious, right? And I'm someone who I took down a local Legacy event playing mono blue Thought Lash, so I get it. Like Thought Lash plus Thoracle, you yeet your library and win the game, and you back it up with packs and forces and all the, that's
Right.
fun. But it's a different kind of fun. This for me is they never knew what hit them. And one of my favorite moments in Magic is put a spell on the stack, look at the table, and I can kind of tell they're confused. And someone says, "Hey, do you mind if I read that card?" In my head, I'm screaming, "We got a reader!" Because that's the moment for me where I'm just like, "Oh, this is sick." Yes, sure, you can read this card from 2004 or whatever, so
That's one of my favorite moments in Commander is when people discounted you and then you go play this and people go like, okay, you're like, I win, and they're like, wait, what? Yeah, did you
Yep.
just pass on my spell and not read the card? like
yeah.
This is a win. Like what? That's massive disrespect. You deserve this loss, sir. You deserve what this happens next. But anyways, just always ignore that person.
Yeah.
I do love your deck. I do agree Thassa's Oracle is super boring, not worth it in mono blue, in my opinion. Like, you have so many more tools in mono blue. Like, if you could run Thought Lash, but why are you running an enchantment in mono blue when that's the hardest thing for mono blue to search for?
You can't.
Yeah, it's like there's no good spell that builds your library in mono blue. Hence why we use a black spell to do it.
There's Paradigm Shift, the 2 mana sorcery. The Leveler's a 5 mana artifact creature that when it ETBs, you exile your library. So, I mean, that's kind of close, I guess. But then there's Paradigm Shift. Yeah, I mean, it's bad, don't get me wrong. But Paradigm Shift is what I used to run in Legacy, which you could go that route because at least instants and sorceries are easy to find. But the problem with Paradigm Shift is it's a 2 mana sorcery and it says exile your library, shuffle all the cards from your graveyard into your library. So you have to make sure that your graveyard is small enough to where when Paradigm Shift resolves, that you don't accidentally have like 4 or 5 cards in your library. And then what? You resolve your Thoracle and someone kills it. You don't have enough devotion to win anymore. So yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
It's not the best game plan.
It sounds weird, but mono blue actually has enough tools to just win as long as they can go infinite. It's like they don't need no fish. Like that, the fish was their gift to the other colors of the format. They said, "Here, guys, here's a blue spell for you guys to play as a win con because we don't need it in mono blue."
So I think that also basically covered our late game section. I imagine it's more of the same, where you're just beating people down or you're looking for some sort of combo win.
Yeah, the big thing I will say though that we didn't really touch on that's super important is I don't know if you've noticed based off of looking at the list, but in the tags you can kind of see this as well. There are 9 clone effects right now, and this is low. I was running 11 before, so there's 3 steps ahead: Flesh Duplicate, Imposter Mech, Mystic Reflection, Machine God's Effigy, Phyrexian Metamorph, Roaming Throne, Sakashima the Imposter, and Spark Double. And of those, a few of them can't clone opponent stuff, but the majority of them can. And those cards really mean that we're in a state right now of mid-range hell where big, powerful advantage engine creatures that Kinnan wants to flip into, or Crom's on board, or Timnas, or even Esper Sentinels and things like that. Those sorts of cards, yeah, I'm going to just jam clones on those in the mid-range part of the game, because then I get to keep up in card draw, keep up in mana production, things like that.
Right.
And in this most recent top 4, well, I split first place in top 3 in our monthly. The end of board state of that game was I had 2 Coma, the Serpent's Coil or whatever, the Simic one that like makes a bunch of 3/3s, makes 3/3s on upkeep or whatever. I had 2 of them copied in play because I used the Sakashima the Imposter to copy the original copy that I made. And then I also had a copy of someone else's Consecrated Sphinx on board, plus another 40 plus power of zombies. So we had a Sphinx battle where every time someone would draw, we would draw our whole deck. And when we passed the turn cycle around, I had another, whatever it was, 6 times 4, I had another 24 power of serpents each time we went around the board. So like you can get into this super bogged down, grindy mid-range state with this deck where sure, other decks are going to be able to find a win out of it, but we present a pretty strong case for I'm cloning the whole table. Where that doesn't work is into spell-based strategies or non-creature clone ability sort of strategies, but the clones really do play a huge part of this deck in the mid to late game.
Yeah. The prevalence of better clones has really changed Mono Blue, in my opinion. It really has improved it. We've seen that in Teferi. We've seen that in Urza. Urza used to be just Poly Urza. Now it's Urza clones, as they like to call it, Attack of the Clones. Just also follows sort of that strategy. So we've talked about like your game plan. What are like some strong matchups for you, like, and some strengths of this deck over like other blue decks for the most part? Like, what makes it go like, yeah, this is a better choice?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this actually, because this has come up with which direction do I want to take the deck, essentially? Like, do I want to take it this way or that way with the sorts of cards that I want to put in? And for me, what I've found is that the decks that I play the best into are, I want to see Italian at the pod. I want to see a more mid-range to controlling blue farm at the pod. I'm even fine seeing like a Winota at the pod, or kind of a Jetmir, or that kind of like a Staxy sort of strategy, because most of the Stax effects don't affect me. Torpor Orb doesn't turn my game plan off; it hinders it a little bit, because that is an ETB trigger on Geralf when a zombie comes into play to give it a +1/+1 counter. But it doesn't stop me from making the zombies. So I just get a board of 2/2s as opposed to a board of huge creatures. But that only shuts off some of my game plan. So even a Torpor Orb effect is like not bad. Grafdigger's Cage, I'm playing. Weathered Runestone, no problem. Cursed Totem, like these are cards I want to actively see. The only Stax effect I don't want to run into is a Drannith Magistrate sort of effect, because I am pretty commander focused. But that's why I have a decent amount of bounce and removal and ways to get around it, and not freaking Drake, Storm Drake effects. So those are the decks that I want to see.
I know an effect that in those nihilists that you don't want to see.
Rule of law.
Yeah, the ROL's effects are just not the best for you.
Yeah, but they're just not played. I mean, I agree with you, but like they're just not commonly played. There are some decks that are on Deafening Silence because it's so powerful. But like the kind of like the days of like, oops, all Rule of Laws, and then I'll eventually just get there with win con list Naya or win con list Selesnya or Mono White or whatever. Those, I mean, maybe you play that deck in the first round of a tournament, but it's just so uncommon to see that all the way up. And it's even getting to the point where there are some decks that are even cutting Drannith Magistrate that it can play it. Just because it's the value that it adds sometimes isn't enough. I still think it's right to play it. I mean, it's a super powerful card, but a lot of decks that are playing white for the silence effects. They're playing white for the Ranger Captors and the Esper Sentinels and the Smothering Tides and the Grand Abolisher effects, in my opinion, and at least from what I've seen. The decks I don't want to see are decks that are much faster than me that also can rebuild quickly. And this is where Rogsai is pretty hit or miss for me. Sometimes they just go underneath me, and I am playing a lot of free counterspells. If you look at my interaction suite in the deck under like stack interaction or whatever I think it's listed as, I've got Active Negation, I've got Flusterstorm, which is amazing at 1. Then I've got Mental Misstep, and I also have Fierce Guardianship, Force of Negation, Force of Will, Mind Break, Trap, and Subtlety. And Subtlety is insane in this deck because you can also sacrifice it to one of the altars or whatever. So sometimes it's actually mana ramp in this deck. But so I can interact enough, but I'm not like a Timna from Blue Farm list where I can interact a bunch on your turn and I don't need to worry because I'm going to redraw myself back into more interaction again by the time it's the next person goes to go off. Yeah, I'm on Fish and Ristic, and I'm also on Steel Enchantment because I think that's super underplayed right now because you want to take other people's Ristics and Fishes. Like, that's really good. But I don't have as easy of a time of redrawing my library as other decks do. So I kind of don't want to see those super turbo lists. And I suppose you're right. I don't want to see the rule of law decks, but the hard controlled Dimir and Grixis strategies, the mid-range and long game strategies, I do want to see. And of course, just like everyone in the format, Magda and Sisay are hard to deal with if people don't understand how those decks work and they let them go unchecked. I give a lot of respect to Magda because I've got a local Magda player who I think is the best, or if not the best, then one of the best Magda players out there, Papa Squats. And he doesn't fuck around. He knows his lines. He knows when to hold them and when to really push the line hard and force. I've seen him like just in his hand hold up a Pyroblast, say nothing the entire game, and it sat in his hand all game. Win cons on the stack, zero Fs given, I'll say. And all of a sudden, when it really matters, very last person to interact, Pyroblast. And you're just like, are you serious? Like, he's just a tight player. And those Magda players they're good, and the Sisay players that are good that don't need to cast spells to win, that can be tough to deal with because I don't have a whole lot of ways to stop those.
Absolutely, man.
Okay, so yeah, I think we covered the weaknesses with that one too.
Yep.
Do you want to go ahead, Samurai?
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, this is not the hardest deck to play in my opinion, at the floor, but I feel like the ceiling is up there. Like, this is one of those, like, I always say, like, my namesake, Malcolm Caddistak, very low floor, very high ceiling. It's the best way to see. That's the best part of a cEDH deck. Just like Roxai, like, decks that you're going to see, like, people really do well on are going to be these decks that, like, it's like the basic concept, beat down people, kill them, kill the person. Okay, that's pretty simple. I can follow that. Kill the person by playing spells. Okay. What are like some tips you'd give to like a newer player like wanting to start playing this deck?
I think this is kind of like a self-serving tip, I guess, but go to my deck list link in Moxfield and enable the tags and look at the section and the way that things are labeled. Because, for example, I have a section called Fast Mana /Rocks, and there are some cards in that section that probably don't make sense when you first read them. So an offer you can't refuse, that's in my Fast Mana section. Which is just a 1 mana blue instant that says counter target non-creature spell its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. Well, that's fast mana in this deck. I can't tell you the last time I used that to counter an opponent's spell because just like my namesake, hold in prio, that is the name of the game. Cast a spell, hold in priority, I'm going to counter my own spell to give myself an advantage. And in some decks, that's cool or fringe or good to know about. In this deck, it's integral if you want to play the deck well. It's very important because not only do you get the extra mana and get to do this line that you otherwise maybe you wouldn't have thought of, and now you have enough mana to go off and play your combo engine and your freaking Drake or whatever, but along the way, you're making power on board because every new spell cast is putting more and more zombies into play. And it's kind of like spinning your wheels in other decks is bad because you're going down cards. in this deck, it's powerful because you're casting more spells, which in turn means more power on board, which means the table is getting more and more scared because you're starting to threaten lethal. Oh, I have 10 power on board. Next turn, I have 20 power on board or more. And then you have those pop-off turns where, boom, you have 100 power on board and you take an extra turn or whatever, right? So an offer you can't refuse is a great example of that. Chain of Vapor, I have in the fast mana rock section. Because again, I'm almost always targeting my own stuff with this, sacking all my lands, replaying all my mana rocks, and going off from there. Energy Tap we talked about as a pseudo, like, pulling the weak, or a pseudo Infernal Plunge, or kind of, I guess, if you want, or actually what's even better, Metamorphosis. That's for the old heads
I was
up.
gonna say, is he gonna name the green one?
Yeah. Oh, dude, that's legal in Pauper. You know I'm naming it.
It's a pseudo burnt offering, basically.
Yeah, burn offering, sacrifice, exactly. Yeah, but the cool thing about Energy Tap is it just taps the creature. And yeah, it only adds spellless mana, but that's usually enough to get you where you need to go here. Yeah. And also Repeal, I have in the fast mana rock section because it's a singular blue mana, because almost you always target a 0-drop in this deck. Like, you target one of your zombies just to 0, like 1 blue mana, bounce a zombie that just instantly dies. You draw a card. I should read Repeal. A blue and X for an instant, return target non-land permanent to its with converted mana cost X to its owner's hand, draw a card. So if you target a token, the token's converted mana cost is 0, so therefore this spell only costs you a singular blue. So you target your zombie, you bounce it, you draw a card, but what happens as you cast it? You make another zombie. So you get a bigger zombie along the way. So you didn't really lose anything. It was just 1 blue mana to draw a card and grow a zombie, essentially, right?
Right.
But the cool thing is when I have this in fast mana and rock, because when you start targeting your mana vaults or your mana crypts or your mox ambers or whatever, this is either mana neutral or mana positive. And you're casting multiple spells because then you recast the rock. So you've got 2 zombies along the way, which is super great. Springleaf Drum, singular generic mana for a artifact that says tap an untapped creature you control, add a mana of any color. So this is essentially just free, makes a zombie. Hidden Strings we talked about, and then Mana Drain is a really big one too. It's blue for a spell that says counter target spell, but then it also says at the beginning of your next main phase, add an amount of generic mana equal to that spell's mana value. So this is a really big one because I'm like known for doing this. I will cast a spell, Pact of Negation the spell, holding priority, Force of Will, the Pact of Negation, and then Mana Drain, the Force of Will. And people are like, wait, what are you doing? And then we go to the main phase, and all of a sudden, I get that 5 Force of Will mana when I go to second main. And with that 5 mana, now I have the availability to, do whatever, cast my Altered Dementia, which then gives me more blue mana, which then allows me to cast the additional spells in my hand or whatever. It kind of unlocks me for the turn. And Mana Drain is just good, right? It's just a valuable, good card if you can get away with playing it. But in this deck, I have it in the fast mana rock section because that's what I'm using it for most of the time. And then the last big one, which I took directly out of Tameshi's book, which I have no problem stealing from good pilots and good brewers, which is Surveyor Scope. So it's 2 generic mana for an artifact, and it says tap, exile Surveyor Scope, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of players who control at least 2 or more lands than you. Put those cards on the battlefield, then shuffle. So an example board state would be I have 0 lands in play, and everyone else has 2 lands. I tap and exile this, and I get to immediately put 3 islands directly into play, 1 for each player. And then you might ask yourself, well, how's this even possible? Well, that's partially because I'm on 24 lands in this deck, and only 19 or 18 of them are actual lands. I believe it's 19. All the rest are MDFC or utility lands. And Surveyor Scope also works great with cards like Gush that have an alternative casting cost of bouncing an island to your hand, or cards like Daze, which I was playing for a while, of bouncing an island to your hand. Yeah, you're right. Gush is 2 islands, but Chain of Vapor also sacrificing islands along the way. Because I have a low land count and I have all these mana rocks, Surveyor Scope just does work. It's a powerful card for sure. So yeah, I mean, you're asking what tips would you kind of look at when you're looking to play this deck? I would say anytime you have an opening hand, you have to be able to cast your commander, and you have to then be able to spin your wheels into cantrips. And if you can do those 2 things, that's a start. On the level 2 version of it, you really want to start thinking about, how am I going to be politicking this game? This deck, in my opinion, is a lot about politics, a lot about convincing the table that I can't win the game from here. I don't play Thoracle. I don't play a card that says I win the game. I don't have a way to take infinite turns. I don't have a way to... The only infinite in the deck is, I suppose, infinite spell casts of a singular spell to then make infinite dudes. But that also doesn't win unless I have other outlets in play, like Altered Dementia. And even then, there's not a whole lot of outlets in the deck. This deck is an inevitability engine as its plan B, right behind the plan A of make a bunch of dumb idiots, smash face. And that just seems so unintuitive in a meta that cEDH has, in the sense that it seems so bad, it seems so elementary that people just do not respect this deck when I sit down to a pod. And I think that's kind of the important thing to think about when you're starting to brew with it or take it out for a spin.
We're getting them with those stealth bombers, man. We're going to keep getting those results. Papa Squats played against them a couple of times. Stealth bomber. Like, we're running these decks. They forget. They're like, oh, well, I don't see this in cEDH often. It's like, no. Please understand. These are not high-power decks that are in this tournament. These are cEDH decks because these will compete with you. These will win the game. These have the tools. They have the power. They have the means. More importantly, we've got the style. The one thing that these other decks lack.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of style on this one.
Next up, for our next section, we have any underrated or overlooked cards, I should say. And I think we went through like a lot of them. And the Survey of Scope was actually one in particular I was going to ask you about, but we did cover that one.
I would say
I was also very excited, and then you went over it, and I was like,
Yeah, for sure. I would say a couple that come to mind for me are Meeting of the Minds. This is 0 mana, draw 2. Card's great. So this is actually an instant for 3 generic and a blue, so 4 CMC. And it has Convoke, which says that, this font's small. Your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for 1 generic of the mana cost or 1 mana of that creature's color. Draw 2 cards. So this is just a divination, just draw 2. And it's an overcosted divination, right? It's 4 mana for an instant, draw 2. But because we make so many zombies, and the best part, when I realized this the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. These are not black zombies. These are blue-black zombies. For some reason, all the zombies in this set are blue and black zombie rogues, to Samurai's earlier point about getting in with rogues to use the prowl ability. So I thought about that, and then I was like, wait a second, these are also blue. So can I do anything weird with Convoke? And if you look at my considering list, I mean, it's 100 and some cards long, but in my considering list, there's a bunch of Convoke cards because I'm always kind of thinking about that. Anytime I see a mechanic that allows you to like tap a creature as part of the cost or whatever, like that's something that I'm like very interested in, obviously. So this card is kind of a sleeper card. Anytime I see that in my opening hand, I read this as 0 mana, make a zombie using Geralf's ability, draw 2. That's huge. It's a really powerful card. Gush we talked about already, which is 5 mana, draw 2 cards at an instant speed. But as an alternate cost, instead of paying its mana cost, you can just bounce 2 islands back to your hand. And this is a big part of the reason why I'm not on Cephalid Coliseum or Obero or the other one that untaps legendaries, Minamo or Talon Gates of Madara. These are all lands I want to be playing, but I'm not on them because I want to try to keep my land count's already really low. I want to try to keep as many fetch lands and islands in the deck as possible for cards like Daze and Gush for that exact reason. And also Surveyor Scope looks for basics.
Right.
And those are big ones. I think also if you've never played against Danny Pink or Jason Bright, which no one has, I think it's hard not to underestimate those cards. Like you almost are like, what is this dumb Fallout card or whatever? And it doesn't seem great, to be honest. But they're so powerful in this deck. And then I guess the last really big one that I think just genuinely confuses everybody when it happens to them, but I love it, is Mystic Reflection. This is in the clone kind of section, or stack interaction, I guess, board interaction, however you want to think about it. Boy, is this card weird. So it's 2 CMC. So it's an instant. So it's a generic and a blue. And it says, it has Foretell, but who cares? And it says, choose target non-legendary creature. The next time one or more creatures or planeswalkers enter the battlefield this turn, they enter as copies of the chosen creature. So a way to think about this is you can you can stack your triggers so that you have a zombie trigger that's about to be made. So a zombie's about to come in off Geralf's ability, and you can respond to it by mystic reflectioning your roaming throne, for example. And then the zombie comes in as a roaming throne. And so now you have 2 roaming thrones, and then every other spell you've cast, or every other spell you cast now starts triple triggering the casts and the +1/+1 counter. Like, it's crazy. You can also target other people's value cards, like somebody else's dockside you can target with your zombie trigger on the stack. Then the zombie enters the battlefield, and now all of a sudden you have a dockside, and you get dockside mana in your mono blue deck. Same thing with Esper Sentinel. Same thing with like a lot of these powerful things. Important to note that you cannot choose legends, but you can also do the same thing with like a powerful planeswalker. So someone's about to put like a 3-mana Teferi on the stack, or someone's about to put Tyvar on the stack, or whatever, and you can say, yeah, that's cool. Now it's a 2/2 zombie. You just target one of your 2/2 zombies, and there it's almost, you can use it defensive or you can use it offensive, and you're always in the driver's seat, and you're making a zombie while doing it. So it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Turning people's commanders into zombies is my favorite thing to do with that thing. It's like, oh, Sisay deck, 2/2 zombie. I'm sure you have a sack outlet, right? That's how Sisay works?
Yeah.
No? Okay. Nadu is a 2/2 zombie? Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful against the super commander reliant decks. I found that there's a reason why I'm on this and Volatile Storm Drake, just because, well, also I want to be able to yoink back my commander if someone steals it from me, because
Right.
I'm a commander centric deck. But yeah, it does some pretty broken things. And then obviously the Sakashima, the Aposture, and Spark Double are just ways to make additional versions of my own Geralf that I can then copy. You can't do it with Sakashima, but with Spark Double, you can Spark Double your commander, and it says on there, and it isn't legendary, which means then you can Machine God Effigy your Spark Double, and you can Phyrexian Metamorph your Spark Double, and you can Flesh Duplicate your Spark Double, and you can 3 steps ahead your Spark Double. And so that's where you can kind of, and I leaned into this strategy a lot harder previously. I was on the other Takashima, the cereal box one from Karkashima. I was on a bunch of spicy stuff. I was on the Nano Gene Conversion. If you've never read that card, that's an insane magic card. This is a 4-mana sorcery, 3 in a blue, and it says choose target creature you control. Each other creature, not that you control, so every creature on the board, including your opponents, becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn, except it isn't legendary. So it's spicy when you have, 5-6 zombies and a Geralf in play, and your opponent has a bunch of stacked creatures or a bunch of powerful value engine creatures or Kinnan or a Coma or whatever. You just go Nano Gene Conversion, targeting your Geralf. Now, all their stuff, they're all Geralfs, but the best part is Geralf only triggers on the player's turn that it is.
Right.
So they're essentially just all vanilla 2/3s. And now all of my zombies are Geralfs. So if you can resolve a Nano Gene Conversion and cast any one other spell, you've essentially just made 70 power or whatever it is. It depends on how many zombies you haven't played. I ended up, I'm testing removing it from the deck right now for my testing for Fishbowl. And I'm testing putting a little bit of stacks in with Grafdigger's Cage. But yeah, we'll see if that ends up serving me. I'm also on Moonsilver Key, which is a very weird magic card, but I think might be good enough. You don't have a whole lot of tutors in mono blue that are doing exactly what I want it to do. And this is one that does. So this is a 2 generic for an artifact. And it says 1 generic, tap, sack it, search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is just a value way that helps me grind through more mid-range hell in the early steps if I'm not on the turbo plan, to be able to just make a land drop if I need to, which sometimes you need to in a deck that only playing 24 lands. Like, you have a hard time just hitting them naturally. You're cantripping and stuff, but sometimes you just need to find them. But the big thing it does is it goes and it finds your Phyrexian Altar or your Ashnod's Altar, which is what I would almost venture to say the best cards in the deck. The altar effects and, of course, ISO Rev, the Isochron Scepter, Dramatic Reversal are also really powerful. But the altar effects are really powerful engine pieces that make that oil up this machine. So yeah, those are the spicy things to think about.
Okay. Next up, we have I guess that actually kind of brings it close really to the deck overall. Was there anything else you would like to say, or any shout outs you'd like to give to like maybe an LGS, any players that maybe helped you with the deck, anything like that?
Yeah, no, I just want to, I'll start by saying just thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. And anytime I get to highlight really cool brews or things that I'm working on, it always fills me with joy. This is what I want to be doing with Magic. I want to be exploring the fringes of cEDH society, so to speak. And I will just say, if anyone has an opportunity to, please come check out my Mox field. It's Holden_Prio. So that's HOLDEN_PRIO on Moxfield. And hopefully there's a link in the video or something if you're nice enough to put it there. Thank you. And please just go and explore. There are so many brews in there. And I've spent this level of detail and attention that I am on this deck on, I would say, over 80% of them. There are fully detailed, fleshed out, multiple page for multiple decks. So there's lots of really cool stuff in there. I've been working on recently a really, really sick brew of Raoul, the Monsoon Storm Flip Walker that I've been winning on turn 1 and 2 with pretty consistently. It's just absolutely bonkers. We're just doing bad things for bad people. Yeah, buddy.
That's really where I pulled the Mind's Desire out from.
Yeah. We got to talk at some point. And then I've also been brewing up a really cool deck that I call High Stakes Hemoglobin. This is a Orzhov deck that's using the Sorin of House Markov Flipwalker as well to do really busted ad nauseum into Children of Korlos, gain a bunch of life, and then flip Sorin and one-shot somebody off the table, along with all the exquisite bloodlines and cool Orzhov aristocrat things and whatever. So I'm always brewing in cEDH. I've really kind of turned my focus to cEDH really hard. I'm almost exclusively playing cEDH now. I'm always paying attention to 60 card formats, especially Pauper and Legacy. But I'm all in on cEDH. It's been a blast doing it. The last shout out I'll give really quick is to the Tucson local scene because they were super welcoming a little over a year ago when I jumped in, and I didn't know anything about EDH, let alone cEDH. I didn't even own a Cyclonic Rift. It's like I just didn't know what you don't know, right? Like these cards are not good in my mind, but they're really good in cEDH. So they were super awesome, and I played almost exclusively at Top Deck Towers in Tucson, Arizona. So if you're ever in the area and you're looking for an awesome place to play, we meet on Thursday nights, and we also have a monthly Sunday tournament. Top Deck Towers is fantastic, and the owner there, Michael Eakin, is a total badass, really good guy. And so him, along with people like Zach Gable and Nick, aka the Papa Squats, and Shane and Pip and AZ and all these guys out there who are really tight players, along with that whole crew. 7 of us are going out to Fishbowl. So the goal there is a little bit of team killing in the top 8. That would be awesome. Be sick to be able to take down the homies in the top 8 matches, playing on wild decks and just showing them what the Wild West is like. So thanks again, guys.
I'd say one of my favorite pastimes of all time when doing tournament Magic and tournament Yu-Gi-Oh! Was driving 10 hours to play a teammate in the first round and kick them so badly they drop.
Yeah, as fun as that is, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope instead it's more like we make it all together to the top 16, top 8 or whatever. But yeah, you're right. That does happen a lot.
But doing it the first round is often the funniest. Especially if you decided to carpool to the event, because then you got the 10 hours back. You're like, so how was everybody's event? It's like
awkward silence.
You killed me, Samurai. Well, it was you or me. Yeah, but you didn't have to do it that hard. I wanted to save time.
Oh no!
I just drove 10 hours. I didn't want to waste my time. Sleep. I gave you a whole 7 hours of the tournament to nap.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there's one more thing we've got for you. And that is our, of course, very spicy scale. It should be in that document I sent you all the way at the bottom. So this is a scientific scale, yes.
I was going to say scientific scale, yeah.
Very precise. So we've got all the way at 2 million. We've got our Carolina Reaper, and then that goes all the way down to 0 with the Bell Pepper at 0 Scoville units. So, we would like to ask you, where would you put this deck on a scale from 0 to 2 million?
Where does the Dune Popcorn Bucket drop? Wouldn't even talk about the name of the deck, but I suppose that's probably a good thing. It's a little not safe for work. Where does the Dune Popcorn Bucket land us here? I think if I'm being I want to be honest. I don't want to just like gas myself up on this one. So I'd love to say, yeah, this is the Carolina Reaper, but I've eaten Carolina Reapers. I love spicy food. I've eaten Carolina Reapers, and you will have hiccups for 4 hours and unpleasant day for the next day. Yeah. There you go. Nice. That's what I'm talking about, Samurai. Yeah, if I'm being realistic, I would say this is probably like in the, if on the bell pepper side of things is Blue Farm Kinnan and Thisay or whatever. And then I would probably put this up at like Jamaican Belle or habanero chocolate, like somewhere up there. Like it's for sure spicy. No one sees it coming. Deck goes burr. It's a blast. Super fun to play. Super unexpected. Puts up really good results and gives you a lot of fun lines to play through, etc. But just the fact that it's mono blue alone means that you can't be that spicy, right? Like there's only so many blue cards, and so you don't get to do those super fun, super out of the box lines that you could with a 2 or 3 color commander sort of combination. So if I'm being a bit modest, I would say, yeah, we're not all the way up at the Reaper level. Hopefully one day I can brew something at Reaper level and take down a tournament with it.
I was thinking Jamaican Belle.
Also Jamaican Belle.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like it's spicy, but it's like it's mono blue.
Only so many things you can do, right?
Yeah, I was thinking like habanero chocolate Jamaican Belle, like that area. So I'll concur with the other 2 experts, and we'll say it's the Jamaican Belle.
It's definitely spicy. It's definitely got cards that other people don't run.
Yeah,
but it's very much a mono blue deck. It's like, everybody's kind of like, this is either going to be a spell slinger or it's going to be like an artifact combo. Oh, it's both. Okay, well, right in the middle, but it's hot.
And I couldn't agree more. It is cool though, like, which is why it's as high as it is. Like, just making a lot of dudes and then making people deal with that is just an interesting strategy. And you have a lot of interesting cards in here that like you'd never see anywhere else in cEDH, and like, not that that's a bad thing, it's cool. So yeah, it's definitely got some kick to it. The very, very last thing we'd like to say is you have earned the very prestigious off-meta guest role in the Deck Check Discord from now until whenever you choose to leave, if you ever do that. You will forever be a yellow name in the Discord.
Oh, yellow name. Let's go.
I mean,
Magic's too easy.
I might get a poll and see if people want to change that from like a yellow to like some other color, but for now, it's yellow.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
I'd
like to thank my family. I'd like to thank God, all the hardworking people out there with the coast.
Out for us, Samurai, before we close this out.
Go ahead and check out his Moxfield. This is a great brewer. He's got a lot of cool things, and I'm not just saying that because he was smart and brewed it. It's got other cool decks on there. So go ahead and check them out. And don't forget to check out the Rainbow Rumble on August 10th.
Yes. I don't know if you know about that. That's going to be a Pride tournament. So you can partner any 2 commanders or backgrounds or planeswalkers with the commander ability together. We have more information that we'll put up some more stuff at the beginning of the video, but if you're interested, check it out. It's free too, and there's prizes, so it's coming up in about a month.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, man. Well, thank you very much again for being here. Definitely check out his Moxfield. We'll link it below. And as always, thanks for watching.